One of the hardest skills when it comes to building any service-based business is closing or objection handling. And many people believe that you need to be the right kind of person, you need to be quite tough, you need to be a bit disagreeable and almost have an argument with the prospect to actually get the close and to ask for the close. But I don't do any of that, and my close rate is quite high. In fact, it's higher than it's ever been before at this current rate. And I have a step-by-step process that I like to follow, and it's been working really well for me. So in this video, I'm going to show you that process. I'm going to tell you how it works, and so you can actually implement this into your own agency and you can close at 20%, if not more, and make a whole lot of money. So if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Ben Lister. I help agency owners to save thousands and thousands of hours by sometimes helping them with their outreach so that they can work on the agency rather than working in the agency. So the first thing to note is that the definition of an objection, it isn't just a question, it isn't just someone saying no. An objection comes after you have told them the price and you have asked for the sale. Now, if there's a question before this point about the service, or if there's a question about you or something like that, it's not an objection, right? The objection is basically you say, okay, my cost is $1,000 and I would like you to buy. Would you like to buy? And they say something to the effect of, no, I need to think about it. No, I'm not ready to buy it today. Something like that, some kind of objection, and they often will say no because of a specific reason. This reason is the objection. And before you do this, you need to have some kind of closing question. And this needs to be rehearsed, because this needs to be something that when you say it, you just act as if the person is definitely coming on board. You know, you've gone through the process, you've told them exactly why this is going to work for them, and now the only logical conclusion is for them to come on board, is for them to say yes. So if I'm dealing with someone called John, I might say, okay, John, are you ready to get started then? Something like this. Or I might just say, okay, John, let's welcome you to the family, or something like that, right? And when you say something like this, if you say it with enough conviction in your voice that it is just a formality, you know, this is the next step, we've gone through this whole process, asked a bunch of questions, I've told you the price, and now of course you're going to come on board, that prospect will subconsciously, or maybe on some conscious level, they will know that you are incredibly serious about this and you just expect them to come on board, and you have so much proof and so much conviction that this is going to work for them and this is going to be the right thing for them. But this is not really related to the close as such, but we need to have some kind of closing question that's in play and that you can just reliably use. And I'll come back to why this is important in just a bit. And so at any point during this whole process, after you've told them the price and you've asked for the close, anything that you say at this point now needs to be with 100% conviction. If you for 1 minute stutter with your words and you're hesitant when they ask you a question about, are you sure this will work? And you say, yes, I think it will. That's not conviction. But if the prospect turns around and says to you, are you sure this will work? And you say, John, I have never been more certain of something in my life. And I mean, I don't even have to explain it there. The difference between someone who's convicted and someone who's confident in their service and someone who isn't is night and day. And if the prospect for 1 second can sense some kind of doubt in your voice, then that's going to multiply exponentially in their head. And so if you're not 100% convicted, if you're not the person who is, there is no doubt in your mind, then the prospect is never going to get to that point. And every slight bit of doubt is going to be amplified 1,000,000 times by the prospect. And so when it comes to objections, there's only 3 real objections: the objection of money, the objection of fear, and the objection of logistics. Okay, if there's any sort of objection that doesn't relate to one of these, and of course they can be displayed in different ways. If someone says, for example, I'm waiting on a payment, that can be a money objection. But for example, if someone says they need to think about it, this is not a real objection. This is what we call a smokescreen. And a smokescreen is basically when someone gives you an objection but is not actually what they're thinking. And if you've never been on a sales call, if you've never actually, been sold to by someone before, it's difficult to understand why this actually happens. There's a lot of different reasons that this can be, but many times this can be because the person is, not confident to say it. Maybe they've said something earlier in the call that doesn't really add up, and, they've told a bit of a lie here and there just to answer the question easy, and now they can't really come back to it. But oftentimes, if someone needs to think about it, if someone needs to speak to their wife, if someone needs to speak to their business partner, whatever it may be, there's always some reason for that, okay? And so if someone gives you the objection, I used to get it, a few times before when I would deal with remodeling companies in America, in the USA, and the business owner would tell me, we like working with American companies. Now, this is the biggest smokescreen in the world, simply because there's no logical reason for that. They just want a reason to say no. the main objection might have been the price, it might have been the fear, it might have been something like that, right? And if someone says to you, for example, they need to think about it, the reason they need to think about it is because they're thinking about one part of the service. They're not thinking about, very specific thing, and they're not going to tell you about it. It would always come down to cost of the service. There's a fear in there, maybe they've tried Facebook ads before and it didn't work, or there's a logistical thing, I'm not sure if we actually have the time to do this at the moment, or something like that, right? And it always comes back to one of these three things. And so when you're actually going for the close and these objections come up, you need to have a process in place to actually eliminate the smokescreen and get it back to one of those three things. And so when we are handling an objection, a question that is not one of these three things, we're not looking for a reason or to overcome that objection. We're trying to uncover one of those three things, okay? And so this is my process for the think about it objection. If a prospect would say to me, Ben, I need to think about this, let's regroup tomorrow, let's have a call tomorrow, or I'll get back to you next week, something like that, I would say, okay, John, no problem. Now, I would say this straight away just to completely be, not defensive and to just be completely, agreeing with the prospect at this point. So I would say, okay, John, no problem. But can I ask, in your own opinion, before you do go and think about this, do you feel like what we do can get you to where you want to go? And if the prospect, for example, has given some kind of goal that they have, 10K a month, they want to get to $1 million a year, something like that, you can obviously add that in there. So do you feel, in your own opinion, that we can get you to $1 million a year? And the prospect will normally say yes at this point. If they say no, this is when you need to basically reverse the question. So instead of now focusing on a positive, do you think it will? You then need to go into a negative and say, no, why do you feel like it can't? Is there anything that you feel like is missing here? Oftentimes they'll say there's nothing missing at all, so you can just basically move on to the next part. And so 99% of the time, you'll be very quickly be able to move on to this next part. And so once they've said yes, or there's nothing missing at all, you now get to ask the question, okay, so why do you feel like it can? Why do you feel like this will get you to the $1 million a year? Why do you feel like it can? And so then they will give some very specific reason, okay? You talk with a lot of confidence, your testimonials look great, something like that. And all we're doing here is we're getting some kind of double tie down, just some confirmation. They're not just blindly saying yes to this. And then once they have this, we can say something along the lines of, okay, so when you do go and you think about this, what is coming up for you that makes you want to think about it? Just to see if I can help you out really quickly right now. And what in essence we're saying here, which is a really, really bad technique, but the way that we're saying it is much better, is we're saying, why do you need to think about it? But because we've done it in this structure, what we're doing here is we're actually focusing on, okay, so you do think this works for you? Yes, I do. And you think this because of this very specific reason? Yes, that's right. Okay then. So why not go ahead? What's the next step? Surely we should be going ahead here. And when you frame it like this, they have to then come up with another reason. Okay. And oftentimes it will be a truthful reason. And so they can say, it's a lot of money. I'm not sure about the price. The price is a tricky one for me. I'm not sure about that. And then this is fantastic. This is exactly what we wanted. We weren't trying to overcome the think about it objection. We weren't going to tell them there's nothing you need to think about. What we're telling them, or what we're getting them to tell us, is what is the specific objection. And so now we can have a conversation about money. Now we can have a conversation about fear. Now we can have a conversation about logistics, whatever it may be. And the same thing with the partner objection, okay? Instead of asking, when you do go and think about this, what is coming up for you, you just flip the question around to, when you do speak with your partner, what is coming up for you, or what do you think will come up for them that may have stopped them going ahead with something like this in the past? And very same technique. You're not asking them, why would your partner object to this? You're basically giving them the double tie down. So obviously you start from the top. So in your opinion, you do feel like this can help you. Yes. And you feel like this because of this. Yes. Okay. So when you go and speak to your partner, what is going to come up for them? What has come up for them in the past? And now we're going to go back to one of these three real objections. And so if then another smokescreen, something that doesn't add up and something that makes no sense at all, let's use the example of, I only work with the US companies that I mentioned before. At this point, you can go back from the top again, okay? And you start from the top. So you do feel like this can work for you. Yes. And then you can say something along the lines of that objection specifically. When you have worked with non-US companies before, what has happened or what has come up for you that makes you not want to do it before? And then they can give you some kind of genuine reason, which you could obviously fight at that point, whether you could hit that head on, or they might give you another smokescreen. But this is kind of the loop cycle that you have to go through until that we get to an actual objection. So once we've handled the smokescreen and we've got through to the root cause of the objection, when we're focused on money, we're focused on fear, or we're focused on logistics, there is a step-by-step process for each of these. And we do the same sort of loop when it comes to money as well. So we're going to ask them, you do feel like this can get you to the $1 million a year, I feel like it can because of this, and you say, okay, if your services were $1,000, you'll say something along the lines of, okay, so if you had $1,000 in your hand right now, would you do it? 99% of the time, they're going to say yes. If they say no for whatever reason, then you need to go back to the pitching. This is not really a closing issue as such, because the service and the value that they've given them on this call and shown them what you can do for them is not enough for them to say yes. So they just don't feel like, even if someone gives them money, they would still pay for it, which is obviously a terrible thing. Okay. And so once they say yes, then you ask them, Okay, so is it a case that there's a bit of uncertainty, a bit of fear here around the actual investment, around coming on board, or is it just the case that you just don't have the $1,000? And now at this point, you can very quickly tell if the person does have the money or not. If they just straight up say, no, I actually just genuinely don't have it, then you can go into payment plans and things like that, right? And then you can try to come up with some kind of deal, if you're willing to do that, of course, with your business. But if they're kind of confusing and they're like, yeah, I mean, maybe I need to see about it, I need to think, then they probably do. They have the money there, it's available to spend, but they are either focused on spending on something else, which is a fear objection, so they would be worried about buying it, or it just means that they are just unsure that it's actually worth that much money and they want to spend their money on this. And so now you're dealing with a fear objection. And so the way you need to think about your service, especially if you're offering some kind of return on investment for your service, which you probably are, is that if you were selling a lottery ticket, right, a winning lottery ticket, and the person was convinced that this was the winning lottery ticket and it was worth, millions and millions and millions, they have the money to spend on that. Even if this person only has $5,000 in their bank account, right, and your services are $4,999, if this service that you're selling, which is, a winning lottery ticket, well, in this case it's a product, but the same principle applies, and they are convinced that the return on the investment they're going to get is multiple times this, they're going to spend it. Even if they don't have $5,000 and your services cost $5,000, they're going to find a way to get it because they know that it works and they know that it's the best possible service for them. And so people do find a way to have the money. And a whole nother topic when it comes to actually getting loans and credit and all that kind of stuff, people get access to way more money than they have at any point in history currently. And so anyone that's saying that they just physically don't have the cash, it's probably because they're just not even thinking creatively enough in terms of like credit and loans and stuff like that, which, I wouldn't encourage if there's something that you're not sure about. But if your service is so good and you actually have the power to change people's lives and to bring on clients and revolutionize their business and give them loads and loads of money and give them a crazy return on investment, then of course that makes a lot of sense and they'll be actually willing to do that. But if they're not, then it comes down to them actually having confidence in your service. And then when it comes to fear, okay, so if this person does have the money and they're not too sure, then it will come to fear. We want to get a confirmation of this. And so I would always say something along the lines at this point of, okay, so it's fair to say there's some kind of uncertainty here. It's fair to say you are not 100% sure whether this is the right thing to spend your money on or whether this is worth the service or worth the investment. They will very rarely say yes to this. It will be some kind of fuzzy answer. They might say, I'm not sure, I think so, or possibly something like that. It basically means yes, they don't want to be, giving you too much and saying, I'm really not sure about this. And so then it comes down to 4 different types of fears. So there's the fear of the business, which is, your business. There's the fear of you, the person selling. There's the person of themselves, so which is basically, whether they can actually put in the work and they can actually be successful. And then finally, it's the fear of the service itself. And so you can ask that question, is it me? Is it you? Is it the business? Is it the service? Like, just help me to understand really quickly. And they will often give some kind of indication, oh, I've done this before and I'm not really sure about this, or, I've been through this process before and I'm not sure about this. Or, it's rare that they're going to say something about you, but they might mention something about, I'm not too sure. You guys don't have a great reputation, or I haven't seen too many testimonials or something like that. And then you can actually hit the objection head on. But what I like to do before you handle the objection, before you have some kind of, proof and you can give them the objection handling technique, you want to get some kind of confirmation that this is actually going to push the sale forward. And so I oftentimes will say, look, I'm more than happy to show you the testimonials that we have and the reviews that we have and all of the great results that we have. But I just want to make sure, is this the only thing that's actually stopping you from moving forward today? If it is, the prospect kind of has no choice when you do prove to them and you do handle their objection that this is the only thing that's stopping them moving forward. Because when you do show them this and you handle the objection and you prove to them that they have no reason to be fearful and there's no need to be worried about this, then they can't go anywhere else, right? But if you just come into this and you basically just say, okay, I'll show you all testimonials and all our reviews and I'll do this and I'll do that for you, then they can just turn around and say, I'm also worried about the price. I'm also worried about this. I'm also worried about that. And then at this point, you're now starting to get more and more objections creep in. But if you get that tie down that this is the only objection that they're worried about, then the prospect kind of has no other excuse at this point. And so bringing back in the closing question, when you have actually handled this objection, now let's say we've just gone through that fear process there, and now I've shown them a few testimonials because they were saying that they were worried that we don't have too many testimonials. They weren't sure if this would work for them because they haven't seen it work for anyone else, and now I've shown them that it does work for many other businesses. Then we can go back to the closing question. So John, now are you ready to come on board? And again, if you say that with just enough conviction, you just assume that they are, then the chance of you getting the close is much, much higher. And if you could almost imagine it, we're going through this sort of loop process, right, where we've just handled the smokescreen objection, now we're going through the money objection, now we're going through the fear objection, and we've completed all those, so now we can ask the question again, and we've actually come full circle, and there's no more objections, or at least we've quashed that objection. maybe another one pops up and we have to go through this whole process again. But you can kind of see how this works. And we finish it with the closing question. It needs to be rehearsed. It needs to be something that you just say off by heart and you just know it. The way that you actually say it is far, far more important. And obviously the specific language that you use, rather than just saying, would you like to come on board? That wouldn't really work as good as if you just say, John, so let's welcome you to the team. What do you say, right? Something like that would probably work a little bit better than saying like, John, do you want to come on board? Or of course you can go for a binary question option. So if you just simply add a yes or no on the end of a question, it gives the prospect no choice but to say one of those. They kind of feel silly if they say something else. And so if you just say, John, so you ready to come on board now? Yes or no? And then they kind of have to say yes at that point. If they want to butt in and like some kind of more like another excuse at this point, or throw in another objection, they're not really answering the question, so it's more difficult for them to do, if that makes sense. And one more thing when it comes to actually closing the sale is every time that you answer one of these questions, you don't just answer the question. The number one thing that you need to be doing at the very start is you want to basically thank that prospect for bringing this up. If you make it seem, if someone says that money's quite a lot, or if they something like, can you just explain how this works quickly? If you then go and say something like, or you just insinuate that this is annoying, you don't want them to actually do this. If you're like, John, so this is how this works, but if I just change that and I actually thank the person for asking this question, and I say, John, I'm really, really glad you brought that up. I almost forgot to bring this up because this is how this works. See, this is one of the best parts about our service. So I'm actually really glad you brought this up. So this is how this works. This is how this works, blah, blah, blah. And then that's how you handle the objection. If it comes across that way more conviction, you have such better tone, you are not stepping into the prospect's frame. So what I mean by that is the prospect will have a frame of negativity. Often when it comes to objection handling, I'm not sure about this. But if you have complete confidence in what you are doing and you're coming in from a positive angle, you're refusing to step into that person's frame. You're refusing to accept any sort of negativity into the conversation. The prospect has to come over to your positivity. Either you go to their negativity or they come over to your positivity. And if you refuse to go to their negativity, then they have to come over. And so basically, that's how that works. Now, this whole technique and this whole system of closing I could probably talk about this for hours and hours and hours. And there's so many different nuances and parts of this and different segments. It really just comes about practicing and testing different things out and seeing how things work. If you're working in different niches, the things that you say and the stuff that you do is not going to be as effective in other niches. So it really depends on the kind of person you're talking to. If you're talking to home improvement business owners in their 40s and their 50s, it's going to be completely different than if you're working with, fitness coaches who are in their 20s, right? And so this is all should be kept in mind when it comes to, creating analogies and, reframing different questions and stuff like that. And obviously the kind of objections you're going to get is completely dependent on your niche as well. But what I would recommend to this is just practice, review your sales calls, go over your process, implement these processes into your business first, see if you can slowly start to work them in. And then at this point, you're going to be closing at a much higher rate when you can start to nail these objections. Because if you think about it, most of your calls do come to the objection stage, right? It comes down to the person making a yes or no decision. And if you can just convert 10% of those extra to say yes by just changing this one thing, just changing this one way how you close, then you're going to make 10% more money just by that. And so there's no real return in business like it, I don't think. And so it is a very straightforward way to actually increase your revenue, and it just takes practice and a bit of work. But if you are looking to book more appointments, go ahead and click the first link in the description. We're not going to ask for your email or your phone number or something like that. It's literally just a video of me explaining how my business does this. I've done this for many different agencies before, but if you don't want to do that, of course, you can just watch these videos. We make 3 of these every single week. But if you did enjoy the video, then go ahead and click the like button, comment if you want me to cover anything specifically at all, and subscribe if you want to see more. But yeah, appreciate you watching this one to the end. Cheers.